The howling wind. The wind was a ravenous beast, tearing at the cave's opening, its shriek amplified by the stone enclosure. Each blast hurled icy needles inward, prickling Sarah's skin and leaving a ghostly pallor on Tom's cheeks. A whimper escaped him as he nestled closer, his small frame vibrating with cold and dread. "Hush, little bear," Sarah crooned, her voice a fragile thread against the storm's fury. She tightened the worn blanket, a meager barricade against the biting draft. A short distance away, 11-year-old Sarah watched, her young face etched with worry. Little Women was clutched to her chest, a paper talisman against the encroaching despair. The candle's dance painted fleeting anxieties on her features, premature lines for one so young. Sarah met her daughter's gaze, offering a wan smile. "We'll be all right, sweetie. This won't last forever." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She hadn't felt this cornered in what felt like a lifetime. Fear coiled in her gut, a persistent ache. Sensing her unease, Tom looked up, his brow furrowed. "Are you afraid, Mommy?" A pause hung in the air before she shook her head, forcing a lightness she didn't feel. "Silly Billy. Mommy's just chilly." The truth was a chilling weight. She was consumed by dread of the storm's ferocity, the cold's insidious creep, and the insistent gnawing of hunger. But above all, she was gripped by the terror of failing them, of being unable to secure their safety. Another surge of wind, a brutal assault, extinguished their tiny beacon. Absolute darkness descended, amplifying the storm's cacophony. A strangled cry tore from Tom's throat as he latched onto her, a desperate lifeline. "It's all right. I'm here." Sarah's fingers, clumsy with cold and fear, scrabbled for the lighter. An eternity seemed to pass before a fragile flame flickered, carving a small sanctuary from the void. The naked relief on Tom's face nearly broke her. She held the lighter high, striving for an impossible calm. She had to be their anchor, even as she felt herself fraying at the edges. She recalled the day she was laid off, the sympathetic yet detached expression on Mr. Henderson's face as he spoke of restructuring, a bloodless euphemism for her personal undoing. The library job had been no fairy tale, but it had provided stability, covering the bills and offering a semblance of normalcy to her children after the wreckage of her marriage. Now, even that meager security had been ripped away. The severance, a pittance, barely stretched to cover rent and utilities for a month. She had fought tooth and nail, bombarding potential employers with applications, attending soulless job fairs, only to be met with a wall of rejection. Each day brought another automated email, another slammed door. She had humbled herself, applying for anything she could find. Fast food, retail, cleaning, but the opportunities evaporated as quickly as they appeared. Either she was overqualified or hopelessly inadequate. She was vanishing, she realized, fading into the background. The savings trickled away. The pantry echoed. In desperation, she had sold their few remaining treasures: her wedding band, her grandmother's tea service, the flickering television. Each transaction chipped away at her soul. Then came the eviction notice, delivered by a flinty-eyed landlord who regarded her plight with cold indifference. He listened to her pleas with detached impatience before informing her, with a shrug, that he had a business to run. Rent was due. No exceptions. They crammed their meager possessions into the old station wagon, a relic from her father. Sarah had pleaded for a different path, clinging to a faint hope, but every option was a dead end. With winter's icy grip tightening and no family to offer refuge, the streets meant certain death. She'd hoped a remote cabin might be affordable, or even camping until something turned up. But the car had sputtered its last breath miles from the nearest town, leaving them stranded. The cave was the final, desperate act, a temporary refuge. She hadn't foreseen days, trapped by a relentless blizzard. Sarah shuddered, drawing Tom closer. The lighter seared her skin. She snuffed it out, plunging them back into the oppressive dark. "Tell me a story, Mommy," Tom pleaded, his voice small and trembling. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, grasping for inspiration. Her mind was a barren landscape, dominated by worry and despair. But she couldn't surrender. She had to remain their fortress. Once upon a time, she began, her voice a shaky whisper, there lived a little bear in a snug little den. She wove a tale of courage and adventure, of unwavering friendship and profound kindness. She told of a brave cub who stared down his fears and triumphed over adversity. The story unfolded with vibrant imagery, drawn from her own love of the outdoors and cherished memories from childhood. She painted pictures of rustling leaves, a gentle stream, the pungent fragrance of pine. As she spoke, a spark of warmth flickered in her chest, a defiant ember. The story was a lifeline, a small rebellion against the darkness and the bitter cold. It reminded her of the power of imagination, the capacity to craft beauty and hope in the face of utter desolation. Sarah, utterly absorbed, edged closer. She knew her mother was composing the narrative on the fly, but the improvisation was part of its magic. It was a welcome distraction from the storm, the hunger, the all-consuming fear. The wind continued its mournful song, its fury seeming to abate slightly, as if even the storm itself was captivated by Sarah's tale. Hours drifted by. The story spiraled, becoming more intricate, more enchanting. Sarah's voice rasped, her throat parched, but she pressed on. She knew that as long as she continued weaving the narrative, as long as she kept creating, they would somehow endure. Eventually, Tom succumbed to sleep, his head nestled on Sarah's lap. Exhausted, yet oddly renewed, Sarah continued to whisper the story, her words now addressed to the engulfing darkness. She glanced at her daughter. "You should sleep," she murmured. "I'll keep watch." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not tired." After a moment, she asked, "Mom, what if we don't get out of this?" Sarah's heart contracted. She longed to lie, to offer false reassurances. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her daughter deserved the brutal truth. "I don't know," she confessed, her voice fragile. "But we're going to fight with every ounce of strength we have. We're going to stay united. We're going to help each other." Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She reached for her mother's hand, her grip firm. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetie," Sarah replied, her fingers tightening around her daughter's. Silence descended, punctuated only by the wind's ceaseless lament. The storm showed no sign of relenting. The darkness was a suffocating blanket. Suddenly, Sarah gasped, her body tensing. "Did you hear that?" Sarah frowned, straining her ears. "Hear what?" "Just the wind's racket." "No, listen." Above the wind's incessant howl, a faint, desperate sound reached her. A bark, distant and muffled, but unmistakable. A fragile spark of hope flared in Sarah's chest. Could it be? Could there be someone nearby? Someone who could rescue them? She scrambled to her feet, her legs stiff and protesting. "I'm going to investigate," she declared, her voice trembling with anticipation. "Mom, don't. It's too risky," Sarah protested, her voice laced with fear. "I have to try," Sarah insisted, her voice resolute. "It might be our only chance." She wrapped the threadbare blanket tighter and drew a shaky breath. She stepped towards the cave's maw, into the storm's furious embrace. The snow lashed at her face, blurring her vision. The wind threatened to shove her off her feet. But she pressed forward, fueled by a desperate hope. She had to find that dog. She had to find help. For her children. A mother's fear. The wind shrieked like a tormented spirit, its icy fingers reaching into the cave's maw. A blizzard propelled by unseen forces danced within, glazing the coarse rock with a brittle sheen. Sarah drew Tom closer, cocooning his frail form with a threadbare blanket. Lily slumbered fitfully, her cheeks ashen against Sarah's flank. The distant canine cry, a beacon of yesterday's hope, was now a taunting echo, devoured by the tempest's unyielding rage. Tom shifted, his pupils dilated in the gloom. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice a fragile thread against the gale. "Will it be all right?" Sarah's chest tightened. She manufactured a smile, the muscles in her face protesting the charade. "Of course, love. We're tough cookies, aren't we?" She squeezed his small hand, hoping to transmit a confidence she sorely lacked. The question lingered, a suffocating weight. How could she pledge safety when she couldn't guarantee her own survival? Her gaze flickered to their dwindling provisions. A scattering of granola crumbs, a nearly empty water bottle, enough for a single, paltry ration. The firewood she'd gathered the previous day was sodden and useless. The cold was a creeping invader, leeching the warmth from their very core. "Tell me a tale, Mommy," Tom begged, his voice trembling like a leaf. "Spin me a yarn about Captain Calico and his dauntless buccaneers." Sarah swallowed, her throat a parched wasteland. Summoning the energy to speak, let alone weave an intricate narrative, felt impossible. Yet, she couldn't refuse him this solace. Storytelling was their bulwark against despair, a tenuous lifeline in the maelstrom. She began, her voice a ragged croak at first, then gaining strength as she immersed herself in the familiar saga. She recounted Captain Calico's audacious exploits, his clashes with monstrous leviathans, his steadfast devotion to his crew. She conjured vibrant imagery with her words, filling the cavern with the symphony of crashing breakers and the plaintive cries of seagulls. As she narrated, she cast furtive glances at Lily, her face still pale, but her breaths coming in steady measure. Tom's eyes glimmered with animation, his tiny hand clutching hers. For a few ephemeral moments, the dread receded, supplanted by the solace of shared fantasy. When the tale concluded, Tom nestled closer, his eyelids drooping. Lily stirred, whimpering softly. Sarah gently stroked her hair. "Hush, darling. Mommy's right here." She unwrapped a granola bar, fracturing it into 3 meager portions. She gifted one to Tom, then offered a morsel to Lily, who gnawed it listlessly. Sarah consumed her own portion slowly, treasuring each crumb. It was insufficient to quell the ravenous hunger pangs, but she knew she had to conserve her strength. "Mommy, I'm still freezing," Tom complained, his body racked with shivers. Sarah pulled him tighter, enfolding him in her embrace. "I know, sweetheart. Me too." She attempted to generate body heat, but her own stores were running low. She had to attempt to ignite a fire. It was their only recourse for warmth, for drying their sodden clothes, for signaling for rescue. She amassed the damp wood, arranging it carefully at the cave's center. She retrieved her lighter, a habit from her smoking past. She flicked the flint again and again, but the flames sputtered and vanished. The wood was too saturated to ignite. Frustration surged within her, a bitter tide threatening to engulf her sanity. She slammed her fist against the icy wall, a silent scream trapped within her chest. "Mommy!" Tom's voice was hushed and fearful. Sarah willed herself to regain composure. She couldn't afford a breakdown. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled. "It's all right, darling. Mommy's just exasperated." She tried once more, this time employing scraps of paper and desiccated leaves she unearthed from her bag. She nurtured the nascent flame, coaxing it, imploring it to flourish. For a fleeting moment, it flared brightly, casting flickering shadows upon the cave's rough walls. But then, with a final sigh, it expired, leaving them in the chilling, suffocating darkness. Despair loomed, threatening to drown her spirit. She was failing her children. She couldn't shield them. She couldn't even provide them with warmth. She looked at Tom, his face gaunt and etched with worry, his eyes brimming with a trust she felt unworthy of receiving. She looked at Lily, her small frame curled against her, utterly helpless. She couldn't surrender. She wouldn't surrender. She had to persevere, even if it meant braving the storm's fury once more. She wrapped the blanket tighter around the children, then rose to her feet, her limbs stiff and aching. "I'm going to step outside for a moment," she announced, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly. "I need to gather some dry kindling." Tom's eyes widened in alarm. "But, Mommy, it's too treacherous." "I'll exercise caution," she pledged, though she knew it was a falsehood. "I won't stray far." She snatched her jacket, pulling it over her inadequate sweater. She inhaled deeply, bracing herself against the frigid onslaught. She had to do this. For them. As she exited the cave, the wind lashed at her like a physical assault. Snow swirled around her, blinding her vision, stealing her breath. The world was a monochrome canvas of white and gray, a desolate wasteland. She faltered for a heartbeat, fear gnawing at her insides. But then she conjured Tom's hopeful gaze, Lily's trusting expression. She took another step, then another, venturing into the heart of the tempest, a mother driven by love and desperation. She had to unearth something. Anything. Echoes in the dark. The wind, a frigid sculptor, chipped at Sarah's exposed skin as she lurched back into the cave, clutching a pathetic collection of icy branches. Inside, the gloom felt heavier, the lantern's feeble glow consumed by the encroaching darkness. Tom's soft whimpers, needles of sound, pricked at her resolve. "I'm back," she croaked, her voice a frayed whisper. "Found a few sticks. Maybe we can coax a flame." Her mother, burrowed deep within their makeshift bedding, shifted. "Did you see anything out there, Sarah? Any sign?" Sarah shook her head. The denial aimed more at herself. Just the storm. Unending snow. Still falling hard. She knelt by the lantern, gingerly arranging the brittle wood. They were damp, unlikely kindling, but she had to persevere. Tom, face smeared with tears and pale as bone, shuffled towards her. "Mommy, I'm so cold," he mumbled, burrowing into her side. "I know, darling. I know. We'll get a fire going. You'll be warm soon." She hugged him close, sharing what little warmth she possessed. Minutes bled into an agonizing eternity as Sarah coaxed the meager pile. Wisps of smoke curled upwards, ghosts of a flame, but nothing caught. With each failing attempt, her hope withered. Despair, an unwelcome shadow, tightened its grip. Then a sound sliced through the silence, a bark distant but distinct. Sarah's breath hitched. She met her mother's wide, questioning gaze. "Did you hear that?" she breathed, scarcely daring to believe. Her mother strained, brow furrowed in concentration. I think so. Like a dog." Tom's head snapped up, his eyes now bright with a flickering ember of hope that echoed, magnified, Sarah's own fragile spark. "A dog? A real dog? Maybe," Sarah hedged, tempering his eagerness. "It could be the wind playing tricks." But even as the words left her lips, she knew better. The sound possessed a resonance, a vibrance absent from the blizzard's howl. Tom scrambled to his feet, his earlier listlessness banished. "Maybe it's lost. Maybe it needs us." He took a hesitant step towards the cave mouth, glancing back at Sarah for encouragement. "Stay here, sweetheart," Sarah instructed, pushing herself upright. "Let me take a look." She approached the opening, heart hammering against her ribs. Could it be? After so long, after so much despair, could deliverance be at hand? She peered into the swirling white abyss. The wind shrieked in her ears, and snow stung her cheeks. Visibility was near zero, but as she scanned the landscape, she caught a flicker of movement in the periphery. A dark form, indistinct and fleeting, but undeniably present. Then she heard again, closer now, a bark, followed by another and another. Unmistakable. It was a dog nearby. "It's a dog," she exclaimed, turning to Tom, her voice a mixture of disbelief and burgeoning joy. "I really hear it. It's out there." Tom clapped, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "Can we go see it, Mommy? Can we help?" "Wait," Sarah cautioned, her mind racing. "We don't know if it's friendly, and it's still treacherous out there." But even as she spoke, she knew she couldn't dismiss the possibility of rescue, of connection, of rekindled hope. The barking intensified, more urgent, as if the dog were guiding them. Sarah felt a jolt of adrenaline, a renewed sense of purpose surging through her. This was it. This was the chance they needed. "Mom," Sarah stated, turning to her mother, I think this dog might be able to help us. I'm going to see if I can find it." Her mother nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a blend of trepidation and fervent hope. "Be careful, Sarah. Please be careful." Sarah took a deep breath, bracing herself against the biting wind and the cascading snow. She grabbed the lantern, its wavering light painting elongated, dancing shadows on the cave walls. "Come on, Tom," she said, reaching for his hand. "Stay close. We're going to find our new friend." Together, they ventured into the storm, the dog's barks their only compass, their solitary beacon amidst the enveloping darkness. The gale buffeted them, threatening to force them back, but Sarah pressed on, her grip on Tom's hand unwavering. The barking grew louder, seeming to emanate from just beyond a snow-laden ridge. Sarah squinted, peering through the curtain of flakes. And then she saw it. A large, shaggy dog, its fur frosted with snow, stood atop the drift, barking with spirited urgency in their direction. It was a breed unfamiliar to her, with intelligent, piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through her. The dog thumped its tail tentatively, then emitted another bark, as if imploring them to follow. Sarah hesitated for a heartbeat. She knew nothing of this creature, its origins, or its destination, but in that moment, it embodied their only chance. "Come on," she said to Tom, her voice infused with newfound resolve. "Let's see where our friend wants to take us." She took another step forward, and the dog, as if understanding her intention, pivoted and bounded away, vanishing into the swirling snow. Sarah followed, heart pounding with a blend of anticipation and apprehension, her hand firmly clasped in Tom's. As they advanced, Sarah noticed something new, a faint luminescence, barely perceptible through the blizzard's ferocity, but unequivocally present. It emanated from the direction the dog had taken, a dim, inviting light that whispered of refuge and security. Hope, a long-dormant ember, reignited within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were going to survive this. The dog, the barking, the faint glow, it felt like a sign. A distant echo in the encroaching night, guiding them towards an uncertain but promising future. The blizzard continued its onslaught, but for the first time since taking refuge in the cave, Sarah felt a stirring of warmth course through her chilled limbs, a warmth born not of fire, but of an unwavering conviction that they were not alone. Lucky's arrival, a blast of Arctic air, sharper than any before, knifed through the cave entrance, momentarily stealing the fire's glow. Sarah instinctively pulled Tom closer, a protective gesture born of desperation. As the embers rallied, a small, snow-dusted creature, shaking like a leaf, limped into the light. It was a dog, a shivering scrap hardly bigger than Tom, encased in a frosty rime. Its tail hugged its underbelly, and tremors racked its tiny frame. A motley mutt, its floppy ears nearly grazed the ground, and a splash of white fur around one eye lended a perpetually bewildered expression. Tom's breath caught. A puppy. He surged forward, his face suddenly radiant, chasing away the shadows of fear. "Mom, look!" Sarah's wariness held her back. "Tom, wait. We don't know it." Yet, even as she cautioned him, the animal radiated vulnerability, not threat. Large, pleading brown eyes sought only warmth and haven. Tentatively, the dog inched forward, a soft whimper escaping its throat. Tom extended a hand, palm upward, murmuring assurances. "It's all right, little one. We won't hurt you." The dog edged closer, sniffing Tom's hand before offering a tentative lick. Tom giggled, all apprehension banished. "He likes me. Can we keep him?" "Please, Mom." Sarah sighed, her resolve crumbling. They were in no position to adopt a stray. Not now. But Tom's hopeful gaze was disarming, impossible to deny. Besides, the dog's arrival was an unexpected reprieve from the dread that had become her constant companion. "Not forever, Tom," she conceded, "but we can offer it shelter for the night. It looks half frozen." Tom whooped, carefully gathering the dog into his arms. The pup, as if understanding, burrowed into Tom's chest, its shivering subsiding. "He's so cold," Tom murmured, stroking its back. "What should we call him?" Sarah watched the tender scene unfold, a feeling unfamiliar in days warming her chest. Could this little creature be an omen, a turning of the tide? How about Lucky, she suggested, the name feeling almost destined. Tom beamed. "Lucky. Perfect. Hey, Lucky," he addressed the dog. "That's you now." Lucky, as if comprehending, gave a weak tail wag and licked Tom's face again. Sarah rummaged through their sparse provisions, finding a scrap of the blanket she used to insulate Tom from the cold. She offered it to him. "Wrap him up in this, it'll help." Tom carefully swaddled Lucky, who seemed to sigh with contentment. He settled down beside the fire, cradling Lucky close. Sarah's gaze sharpened. The dog was painfully thin, ribs stark beneath its matted coat. "He's hungry, Mom," Tom said, his brow furrowing with concern. "Can we give him something?" Sarah bit back a grimace, acutely conscious of their dwindling rations. They needed to hoard every crumb. Yet, she couldn't turn away from such obvious need. "I have a bit of jerky left," she said, retrieving the almost empty bag. "We can share it." Tom carefully broke off small pieces of jerky, offering them to Lucky. The dog devoured them eagerly, its tail gaining a little more energy with each bite. As Lucky ate, Sarah scrutinized him. A worn collar encircled his neck, but the tag was gone. Someone must have lost him. She hoped they were searching. "He probably has a family," she mused, more to herself. "Someone must be worried." "Maybe," Tom answered softly. "Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's alone, like us." Sarah's heart twisted at his words. He was right in a way. They were all alone, until now. Now they had Lucky, and Lucky, it seemed, had them. As the fire popped and hissed, painting the cave walls with dancing shadows, Tom succumbed to sleep, his arm draped protectively around Lucky. The dog, nestled close, seemed to melt into the moment, its breathing growing deep and regular. Sarah watched them, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within her. Gratitude, fragile hope, and nagging apprehension. How long could they endure this? What would happen when the food ran out? She banked the fire, feeding it a few more precious sticks. The storm continued its assault outside, but within the cave, a delicate peace had taken root. A peace gifted by a shivering stray at their lowest ebb. She reached for her journal, its familiar weight a comfort in her hands. She flipped through the pages, pausing at a blank space. Perhaps she could chronicle Lucky's arrival, the unexpected benevolence of a lost dog in a raging blizzard, the way hope could materialize in the most improbable forms. But exhaustion claimed her before she could set pen to paper. She closed the journal, postponing the task. For now, she would simply stand watch over her son and their new companion, and pray for a respite from the storm. Leaning against the cold stone wall, she listened to the wind's mournful cry. She thought of her mother and the life she had left behind, a life that now seemed impossibly distant. Yet, here she was, in a forgotten cave, with her son and a scruffy dog, finding solace in the simplest blessings. A crackling fire, a shared meal, and the unconditional affection of a child. Perhaps she considered that was the essence of it all. Perhaps that's what defined family. Not blood, not history, but the bonds of love and loyalty forged in the face of impossible odds. The fire began to wane. She added another log, mesmerized by the leaping, shifting flames. Lucky twitched in his sleep, snuggling closer to Tom. Tom murmured in his dreams, his grip tightening around the dog. Sarah closed her eyes, focusing on the steady rhythm of her son's breathing and the dog's soft snores. In the darkness, she allowed herself a flicker of optimism, a silent prayer that somehow they would see this through, a possible escape. A weak, jaundiced light seeped into the cavern, staining the ice walls a spectral azure. Sarah groaned, her muscles stiff and aching from the cold, unforgiving floor. Tom remained asleep, nestled against her, a small hand tangled in Lucky's fur. The dog, however, was alert, his amber gaze fixed intently on Sarah. A nudge, wet and insistent, pressed against her palm. She sighed, weariness weighing her down like a stone. "Morning, fella," she croaked, her voice gravelly. She stroked his head, feeling the wiry texture of his coat. A low whine escaped Lucky, a mournful vibration in the close air. He rose, shaking off the vestiges of sleep. Instead of settling, he moved towards the cave mouth, his tail giving a tentative twitch. He paused at the edge, peering out at the blizzard's furious dance. Turning back, his gaze locked with Sarah's, unwavering. Then, a sharp bark cut through the wind's lament, echoing oddly in the frozen stillness. Another bark followed, then another, each punctuated by a pleading whimper. Unease coiled in Sarah's stomach as she watched. What was the urgency? She glanced at Tom, still lost in slumber, his face pale against the rough weave of their blanket. The thought of braving the storm again filled her with a bone-deep dread. Their stores were critically low, and the previous foray had almost been their undoing. "What is it, boy?" she breathed, barely audible above the wind's shriek. Lucky didn't react to her words. He simply barked once more, then ventured a few steps into the swirling white, casting an expectant look over his shoulder. He seemed to be compelling them forward. Sarah hesitated. Was this some primal urge, drawing them towards, what? Further peril? Or could it be something more? Could this rescued stray, taken in from the cold, somehow be offering a lifeline? "Sarah," Tom mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. He scrubbed at his eyes and sat up, squinting in the dim light. "What's Lucky up to?" "He wants us to follow him," Sarah replied, carefully masking her own apprehension. Tom's eyes widened. "Follow him where?" He scrambled up, his usual morning grumble forgotten in his burgeoning curiosity. He lurched towards Lucky, reaching out a scratch behind his ears. "Where are we off to, Lucky? You gonna show us something cool?" Lucky licked Tom's hand, then barked again, tilting his head towards the tempestuous world outside. Sarah observed them, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and hope. Could she place her faith in this animal? It felt like madness. They were already teetering on the precipice of despair. To blindly pursue a stray dog into the heart of a blizzard seemed like a fool's gamble. But what other option remained? Staying put meant slow starvation, waiting for a salvation that might never arrive. The storm raged on, and their dwindling supply of firewood offered little comfort. She pictured her mother, her face etched with worry before the lines of communication went dead. She thought of Tom, his innocent gaze brimming with a hope she desperately tried to nurture, a hope she couldn't bear to crush. Then she looked at Lucky, tail thumping a hopeful rhythm against the cave floor, his brown eyes gleaming with an almost uncanny understanding. He wasn't just a stray seeking refuge. He seemed to be presenting them with something more. A chance. A fragile ember of hope flickered within her. "All right," she conceded, her voice stronger than her resolve. "Okay, Lucky, let's see where you're leading us." Tom whooped with joy, snatching his tattered scarf and wrapping it around his neck. "We're going on an expedition," he declared, his face radiant with excitement. Sarah forced a smile, attempting to mirror his enthusiasm. "Indeed, we are," she said, "but we need to be cautious. The storm is fierce, and we need to stay close." She set about packing their paltry belongings, her movements swift and economical. Every crumb of food, every shred of blanket was invaluable. She assessed their water reserves, portioning it out with meticulous care. Despite her actions, a persistent unease nagged at her. What if Lucky was leading them into an ambush? What if this was a mirage, a cruel twist of fate? But she suppressed the doubts. She had to. For Tom. For herself. They had to take the risk. "Ready?" she asked, turning to Tom. He nodded eagerly, his eyes bright. Lucky barked in reply, as if acknowledging their decision. Sarah inhaled deeply, bracing herself against the frigid air. She grasped Tom's hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Let's go," she said, and ventured out into the storm, following the small dog who just might hold the key to their deliverance. The snow lashed around them, blinding and relentless. The wind shrieked in their ears, a constant reminder of the peril that enveloped them. Lucky, undaunted, pressed forward, his small form appearing and disappearing in the swirling white maelstrom. He seemed to possess an innate sense of direction, his paws sure and steady in the deepening drifts. Sarah trailed after him blindly, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had no idea where they were headed or what awaited them. All she knew was they had to keep moving, keep hoping, keep believing in the little dog who had offered them a possibility of salvation. The journey had begun. Through the blizzard, Sarah's fingers, clumsy with cold, fussed over Tom, swaddling him in every layer she could spare. Woolen socks, a threadbare fleece usually reserved for his head, and her own scarf, wound tight until only his wide, anxious eyes peeked out. "All right, buddy," she managed, her voice a shaky attempt at cheerfulness. "Ready to chase after Lucky?" Tom quivered, a tremor that had little to do with the temperature. "Chase him where, Mom?" She avoided his searching look, concentrating on the knot of the scarf. "Just seeing where he's off to. Maybe he knows something." He offered a small nod, clearly dubious, but blessedly silent. Sarah envied his simple faith. She, on the other hand, felt like she was steering them directly into oblivion. Yet, the alternative, huddling in the cave, watching their dwindling resources vanish, felt even more dire. She tugged her hat lower, the wind already a sharp slap against her cheeks. Despite her layered clothing, she knew warmth was a fleeting luxury. The wind shrieked, a banshee's wail, and the snow showed no mercy. The world was a disorienting swirl of white, where the ground and sky had become one. "Ready?" she asked again, the question barely audible above the storm's fury. Tom squeezed her hand, his small fingers tight. She inhaled deeply, summoning a resolve she barely felt. "Let's go then." Lucky was already positioned at the cave's mouth, his tail a frantic metronome. He glanced back, his bright eyes an urging invitation. For a heartbeat, Sarah wavered, the cave's dim, sheltered interior whispering promises of safety. But then she met Tom's gaze, his young face bearing a fragile hope, and she knew retreat was impossible. They plunged into the tempest. The blizzard slammed into them with brutal force, stealing the air from their lungs and pelting their exposed skin with icy needles. Sarah gasped, momentarily lost in the blinding flurry. Tom whimpered, burying his face against her leg. She encircled him with a protective arm, pulling him close. "Keep your head down, honey," she yelled against the gale. "Just keep your head down and stay with me." Lucky, seemingly immune to the elements, bounded forward, his small, brown form vanishing in the mounting drifts only to reappear, a furry pioneer forging a path. He was a diminutive guide through the oppressive white. Sarah struggled to maintain pace, the wind clawing at her clothes and the snow leaching the feeling from her feet. Every step was a monumental effort, each breath a fight against the frigid air. Tom stumbled alongside, his short legs struggling against the uneven ground. "Mom, I'm so cold," he managed, his voice muffled and thin. Sarah squeezed his hand, offering what comfort she could. "I know, sweetie. Just a little further. We're almost there." She had no certainty of that, but the words were essential, a lifeline to cling to. They pressed onward, following Lucky's erratic tail through a world transformed. Familiar landmarks had disappeared, swallowed by the relentless snow. Sarah was bereft of any sense of direction, utterly reliant on Lucky's instincts. After what stretched into an age, Lucky halted. He stood at the edge of a slight decline, barking with unrestrained joy, his tail whipping back and forth in a frenzy. Sarah strained her eyes against the snow, trying to discern the object of his excitement. Initially, she saw only the swirling, impenetrable white. Gradually, as her vision adjusted, she detected a vague, dark form in the distance. It was indistinct and blurry, but undeniably something. Something other than the monotonous landscape of white. A spark of hope ignited within her, a sudden warmth battling the pervasive cold. "Tom, look!" she cried, gesturing towards a shape. "Do you see it?" Tom peered ahead, his eyes widening with awe. "What is it, Mama?" Sarah didn't know for sure, but she dared to believe. "I don't know, honey, but Lucky seems to think it's important." They started down the slope, the snow deepening, each step a greater challenge. Sarah faltered, nearly losing her footing, but managed to steady herself. Tom gripped her hand tightly, his small fingers digging into her palm. As they drew closer, the shape began to solidify. It was a structure, a substantial structure, too large to be a mere cabin. It was a house, a grand house. Sarah's heart leaped with renewed vigor. A house signified inhabitants. Inhabitants meant warmth, refuge, and perhaps even sustenance, perhaps even deliverance. But as they neared, a fresh wave of apprehension washed over her. The house stood dark, silent, uninhabited. No light emanated from the windows, no smoke plumed from the chimney. It projected an air of abandonment. They reached the front steps, Sarah leading, Tom shadowing her. The wind roared around them, flinging snow into their faces like icy shards. Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering above the door. What if it were vacant? What if it were yet another illusory promise? Lucky nudged her leg, letting out a soft whine, as if sensing her trepidation. He gazed up at her, his eyes pleading. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling her resolve. She had ventured this far. She couldn't succumb to retreat now. She reached out and grasped the doorknob. It was frigid, metallic, and surprisingly unlocked. With a final surge of determination, she pushed the door inward and stepped across the threshold, pulling Tom along. The darkness enveloped them completely. The wind still howled, but its fury was muted now, a distant echo of the storm raging outside. They were within, but were they truly safe? The long, cold walk. The gale shrieked, a feral keen that gnawed at Sarah's exposed flesh. Every surge threatened to wrench Tom from her grasp, his small form a leaden burden as she forged ahead. Her thighs screamed in protest, each advance a Herculean effort in the snow-choked path. Almost there, Tommy, she rasped, her words crystallizing before her. Just a little further. A mumbled response tickled her neck, the sound swallowed by layers of scavenged wool. She couldn't decipher the words, but the listless drape of his body conveyed all. He was utterly depleted. Lucky, typically bounding with boundless energy, now struggled to keep pace, his tail tucked low against the bitter cold. He'd cast worried glances their way, his dark eyes reflecting the chaotic swirl of white. A spike of guilt pierced Sarah's heart. She'd dragged them into this maelstrom, chasing a fool's errand sparked by a chance encounter with a stray. "Mom," Tom's voice, barely a whisper. "My feet feel like ice." Sarah hoisted him higher, her own frozen fingers struggling to maintain purchase. "I know, Peanut. We'll be snug inside soon, where it's toasty." Imagine a roaring fire and steaming cocoa. Her voice trailed off, the vision fading like a mirage. They battled onward, the world reduced to a monochrome blur. The wind redoubled its assault, stinging their faces like a swarm of angry bees. Sarah squinted, fighting to keep Lucky within sight. He was their compass, their only link to whatever sanctuary lay ahead. Abruptly, a savage blast of wind slammed into them, momentarily eclipsing her vision. When sight returned, Lucky had vanished. Panic flared. "Lucky!" she bellowed, the words shredded by the wind. "Lucky, where are you?" Tom began to sob, his small frame trembling against her. "He's gone, Mommy. He left." "No, he didn't," Sarah insisted, forcing a calm she didn't possess. "He's just ahead. He probably can't hear us over the wind." But doubt burrowed deep. Had he abandoned hope? Had their fragile luck finally shattered? "Lucky!" Tom cried again, his voice cracking. Sarah desperately scanned the whirling void, her heart hammering. Every shadow, every drift, seemed to taunt her with the specter of his absence. She couldn't lose him. He was more than a mere animal. He was a symbol, a guiding star in this blinding squall. "We have to press on," she said, her voice ragged. "He wouldn't desert us. He's waiting." She ventured a tentative step, then another, calling his name until her throat felt like sandpaper. The wind seemed to mock her, flinging the words back in her face. Tom clung tighter, his weeping muffled. Then a distant bark sliced through the tempest. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with nascent hope. Tom sniffled, nodding, his eyes wide with renewed faith. "He's there. He's still there." Sarah quickened her pace, her aching muscles screaming in protest. The bark echoed again, closer this time, and then she discerned him, a dark silhouette against the white canvas, tail whipping back and forth, standing near something resembling a gate. Relief flooded her, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. They weren't forsaken. He hadn't abandoned them to the elements. They lurched towards Lucky, the gate looming larger with each step. It was an ornate, wrought iron monstrosity, half submerged in the accumulating snow, guarding a long, serpentine driveway that vanished into the churning whiteness. Reaching Lucky, he nudged Sarah's mittened hand with his cold, wet nose, then spun and trotted toward the driveway, glancing back as if beckoning them to follow. Sarah hesitated. The house, if that's what awaited them, remained hidden, swallowed by the relentless storm. They were depleted, frozen to the bone, and utterly reliant on the instincts of a found dog. Was this a refuge, or merely another cruel jest of fate? She gazed down at Tom, his face gaunt and tear-streaked. He was shivering uncontrollably. She couldn't let him succumb to the cold. She had to gamble. "Come on, Tommy," she said, her voice laced with newfound determination. "Let's see what Lucky has unearthed for us." She adjusted Tom in her arms, inhaled deeply, and planted a foot on the snow-choked driveway, shadowing the dog toward the unknown. The wind seemed to abate slightly, as if the storm itself was holding its breath, curious to witness their discovery. Each footfall crunched heavily, the sound amplified in the eerily silent expanse. The driveway seemed interminable, snaking through what she guessed were once manicured gardens and lawns, now entombed beneath a thick, seamless layer of snow. The relentless wind buffeted them, but the sheer exhaustion seemed to numb the bite of the cold. She focused on the mechanical act of moving, on Lucky's purposeful gait, on the faint promise of sanctuary. What seemed like an age later, a shape began to materialize from the swirling vortex. Initially a vague, dark smudge, but as they advanced, it sharpened into focus. A house, a monumental house. It stood before them, a somber and imposing edifice, its windows like hollow sockets gazing out at the fury. Details were obscured by the maelstrom, but she could discern that it was ancient, perhaps derelict. Snow clung to its gables and turrets, lending it an ethereal aura, simultaneously inviting and forbidding, a silent sentinel guarding forgotten secrets. Nearing the house, Lucky erupted in a frenzy of excited barks, leaping near a set of towering double doors. He turned to Sarah, his eyes gleaming with expectation. He had discovered something. He had guided them here. Sarah reached the doors, her numb fingers fumbling with the iced overlatch. She pulled, and with a groan of rusted hinges, one of the doors swung inward, revealing a black and cavernous entryway. The wind redoubled its assault, as if determined to deny them entry. But Sarah stood resolute, her gaze fixed on the inky blackness beyond. This was it. This was their chance to escape the storm's wrath. She stepped inside, Tom clutched securely, Lucky bounding ahead. The door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud, plunging them into near absolute darkness. For a moment, Sarah remained motionless, her heart hammering in her chest, listening to the tempest rage outside. Then, slowly, her vision began to adjust, and she could make out the faint contours of the entryway. A sweeping staircase, a massive chandelier veiled in dust, and the subtle aroma of something vaguely familiar. They were inside, but were they truly safe within these walls? Fallen hope. The porch timbers complained beneath Sarah as she dragged Tom closer to the heavy oak door. He was a dead weight, his breath a shallow, ragged counterpoint to the storm's fury. Lucky whimpered, his damp nose a cold comfort against her chapped hand. Fatigue threatened to drown her, but she clung to consciousness, her gaze fixed on the carved panels before them. A sudden, jarring halt. Her boot snagged on a warped board. A lance of pain stabbed up her leg, eliciting a cry swallowed by the tempest. Tom shifted, nearly slipping from her grasp. Panic flared. With a surge of adrenaline, she hauled him back, averting disaster, but her ankle buckled beneath her. She crashed onto the frosted planks, Tom landing awkwardly against her bosom, and stars burst in her vision. The gale seemed to taunt her, ripping at her scarf and lashing her face with icy needles. Her stomach churned. She lay stunned for a moment, Tom's weight oppressive. "Mommy," his voice, thin as a whisper, barely cut through the wind. He stirred, his face ashen. Ignoring the throbbing in her ankle, Sarah struggled to sit. "I am all right, sweetie. Just a stumble." Her voice trembled, a blatant lie. She adjusted Tom, holding him close. "Are you hurt? Did you bump your head?" He blinked slowly. "Cold," he mumbled. A wave of relief, quickly followed by a renewed stab of agony from her ankle. Testing it was a mistake. A white-hot spike shot through her, stealing her breath. Hopeless. Injured and stranded in the heart of a blizzard. Fear constricted her throat. She had to get Tom inside. Safety lay on the other side of that door. But how? Lucky yipped, pacing in agitated circles. He nudged her hand, then scratched at the door with renewed fervor. "Good boy, Lucky," she rasped, the words lacking conviction. Her eyes traveled to the looming edifice of the house. A dark, silent presence against the swirling white. It promised succor, yet radiated an unnerving aura. Had she blundered terribly? Had desperation driven her to lead her children into a greater peril? She glanced at Tom, his features delicate and pale in the fading light. His breathing was faint and uneven. He required warmth, rest. Tears stung Sarah's eyes, freezing instantly on her lashes. She was failing him, failing them both. "Mommy, are you sad?" Tom breathed, his small hand reaching to brush her cheek. His touch was a jolt, jolting her back to reality. She couldn't afford a break. Not now. Tom depended on her. Drawing a ragged breath, she pasted on a smile. "Just a snowflake in my eye, darling." She framed his face with her hands, gently wiping away the clinging ice. "We're going to be fine, Tom. I promise." But even as she spoke, doubt festered. What if she couldn't deliver on that pledge? What if this house was a snare? What if her injury was too incapacitating? Her gaze flickered to her ankle. It was ballooning rapidly, the skin mottled and angry. Bearing weight was unbearable. Her thoughts flew to her mother, alone and exposed in the car. She hadn't checked on her since the fall. "Stay put, honey," she instructed Tom, her voice shaky. "Just a moment. I need to see how Grandma is." Gingerly, she settled Tom onto the relatively drier section of the porch, making him as comfortable as possible. He whimpered but didn't resist. Lucky immediately curled beside him, a furry shield against the cold. Gritting her teeth, Sarah leveraged herself up, clutching the porch railing for support. Each movement ignited a fresh wave of agony in her ankle, forcing a gasp from her lips. She limped towards the edge of the porch, peering through the swirling curtain of snow towards the distant silhouette of the car. It seemed impossibly far, an insurmountable distance. And what if her mother was worsening? What if the cold had already claimed her? The thought was a brutal punch. Jaw clenched, she shuffled forward, one agonizing step at a time. The wind shrieked around her, obliterating all other sounds. The stinging snow obscured her vision. Finally, she reached the porch's edge and strained to see through the blinding snow. The car remained, a blurred shadow against the white chaos. But was her mother still alive inside? "Mom," she yelled, her voice swallowed by the gale. "Mom, are you okay?" Only the storm's relentless howl answered. Terror seized her. She had to reach her. She had to ascertain her well-being. But she could barely stand. How could she possibly traverse the distance? Despair descended like a shroud, cold and suffocating. She sank to her knees, the frozen ground searing her skin. She had failed them. She had dragged her children into this ordeal, and now she was too feeble, too broken to rescue them. Tears flowed freely, mingling with the snow. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the biting cold, the crippling fear, the crushing sense of futility. She should have remained in the car. She should have waited for deliverance. She had been consumed by desperation, driven by a frantic need for refuge, and made a catastrophic error. And now, her children would suffer the consequences. She had chased a stray dog into the wilderness, and it had led them to their demise. A distant glow, The wind keened, a desolate cry that amplified their isolation with every blast. Sarah faltered, her sodden denim clinging uncomfortably to her throbbing ankle. Tom remained motionless, his face bleached white by the dwindling daylight, struggling through the snow. "Tom? Honey, it's me." She sank to his side, the frozen ground biting into her knees. His eyelids flickered, a fleeting spark of recognition before his gaze drifted. "Mommy, so cold." He breathed, his voice a fragile rasp. A wave of despair threatened to drown Sarah. She drew him close, attempting to offer warmth, a futile effort against the storm's onslaught. The car. She had to see about her mother. But each moment away from Tom felt like a brutal amputation. Lucky whined, nudging Tom's hand with his damp nose. Usually, Tom would erupt in giggles, eager to pet him, but he remained inert. This sight jolted Sarah with renewed alarm. She had to act. She had to do something. Anything. "I need to check on Grandma. All right, love?" Sarah managed, her voice wavering despite her resolve. "Lucky's going to stay right here with you. He's such a good boy, isn't he?" The dog lapped at Tom's cheek, a silent vow of companionship. Sarah bent and pressed a kiss to Tom's brow, the icy touch sending tremors through her. She forced herself upright, each step a painful reminder of her injury. As she pivoted back towards the vehicle, a new sound pierced the wind's mournful keen. Lucky was barking, not the fearful yaps from before, but a series of sharp, joyous barks, his tail a blur of motion. "Lucky! What is it, boy?" Sarah shouted, her words snatched away by the gale. He tugged at the makeshift leash, pulling westward, away from both house and car. He barked again, louder this time, then launched into a dizzying dance, leaping and twirling in the accumulating snow. Sarah squinted, her eyes burning from the icy wind. Visibility was reduced to mere feet. "Lucky, come on. We need to stick together," she pleaded, but the dog was adamant, his focus unwavering. Another bark ripped through the air before he bolted, the rope slipping from Sarah's numb fingers. "Lucky! No, come back," she yelled, but he vanished, consumed by the swirling white vortex. For a heartbeat, Sarah stood paralyzed, the weight of their predicament like a physical blow. Had she erred again? Was this the breaking point? Then, cutting through the impenetrable curtain of snow, she perceived it. A dim, almost imperceptible glimmer. A miniature beacon in the overwhelming darkness. She blinked, wondering if it was a mere illusion, a product of her frantic hope. But it endured, a soft, golden luminescence that seemed to throb with its own fragile pulse. Hope, tenuous and nascent, ignited within her. "Tom!" she cried, her voice raspy. "Tom, look!" She stumbled back to his side, her heart hammering against her ribs. She knelt once more, gently shaking his shoulder. "Tom, wake up! Look!" His eyelids fluttered, this time with improved focus. He blinked, his brow creased in puzzlement. "What, Mommy?" he mumbled. Sarah gestured westward, towards the distant glow. "Look, Tom. Do you see it?" He strained his eyes, his gaze following her outstretched arm. For a moment, nothing. Then, the gradual bloom of comprehension illuminated his face. "A light," he breathed, wonder lacing his voice. "Yes, a light. Maybe it's a dwelling. Maybe someone can assist us." Tom's eyes widened, a flicker of his former self rekindling within them. He attempted to sit, his small frame trembling. A house. With people. Perhaps, darling. Perhaps. Sarah dared not raise his expectations too high, yet the luminescence, it felt like salvation. A faint smile graced Tom's lips, the first genuine smile Sarah had witnessed in an age. "Can we go there, Mommy? Can we get warm?" "Yes, honey. We could try." The promise of warmth, shelter, and human contact seemed to inject Tom with a sudden surge of vitality. He pushed himself into a sitting position, his eyes riveted on the distant glimmer. "Come on, Mommy. Let's go." Even Sarah felt a jolt of adrenaline, a renewed resolve to struggle for their survival. The light, that minuscule spark of hope, had gifted them something to pursue, something to believe in. However, Her ankle throbbed with each movement, a grim reminder of her limitations. She couldn't traverse far, not in this tempest, and she still needed to check on her mother. "Okay, sweetie," she responded, aiming for an assurance she didn't feel. "But first, I need to see about Grandma, okay? Then we'll move toward the light. Together." Tom nodded eagerly, his gaze still locked on the distant glow. He reached and clasped Sarah's hand, his tiny fingers gripping hers tightly. "Lucky discovered it, Mommy," he said, his voice brimming with awe. "Lucky rescued us." Sarah glanced back at the house looming behind them, a dark and silent monolith against the storm. Then, she shifted her focus to the pale glow in the distance, a beacon of warmth and security. And she was convinced, with a certainty that defied all reason, that they had to move toward the light. Assisting Tom to his feet, she braced against the wind. He leaned against her heavily, his small frame shivering. Together, they took the initial cautious steps toward the distant glimmer, toward the hope Lucky had unearthed for them in the heart of the blizzard. Snow lashed at their faces, but now they had a destination in sight, a guiding star through the storm's fury. The mansion appears. The blizzard seemed to relent as they pressed onward, the frigid air itself bracing for what lay ahead. Tom, rejuvenated by the distant glow and the prospect of succor, leaned on Sarah, his tiny fingers laced tightly with hers, a surprising strength in his grip. Lucky, ever vigilant, trotted ahead, his tail offering an occasional hopeful twitch that scattered crystalline snow dust behind him. "Almost there, Tommy," Sarah croaked, her voice raw from the icy air and the strain of their journey. Each stride was a hard-won victory against the gale, testament to her unwavering will. Stealing a glance back at the cave, now a gaping void swallowed by the swirling white chaos, she shuddered. Noritrit. As they topped a gentle rise, the light sharpened into focus. It wasn't merely a beacon. It framed a window, radiating inviting warmth from within a structure that grew exponentially larger with each step. A dwelling. No, more than that, a manor. Or at least, that's how it appeared through the driving snow in her weary eyes. A sprawling estate of stone and somber wood, its peaked roof laden with snow. Several chimneys, like steadfast guardians, punctured the turbulent sky, one releasing a plume of ghostly smoke that dissolved into the tempest. The thought of a blazing hearth within sent a jolt of desperate hope through Sarah's veins. "Mommy, is that a palace?" Tom breathed, his voice laced with a wonder that briefly overshadowed his discomfort. Sarah squeezed his hand. "Something like that, sweetie. A safe haven, we hope." She prayed. She sounded more convinced. Reaching the property line, Lucky barked sharply, then turned, as if imploring them forward, sensing their wavering resolve. And Sarah did hesitate. The manor was imposing, its grandeur almost mocking their bedraggled state and dire circumstances. Who resided in such opulence? Would they offer sanctuary or coldly reject them, branding them intruders upon their privileged existence? The prospect of being cast back into the storm was nearly as harrowing as the storm itself. Maybe we should reconsider," Sarah murmured, the words tasting like copper on her tongue. Tom looked up, brow furrowed with concern. "But, Mommy, it smells warm there. I can smell it." He was right. Borne on the wind, beneath the stinging scent of snow and fir, was a faint, tempting aroma of kindling embers and something else, a sweet fragrance akin to freshly baked bread. Sarah's stomach responded with a loud rumble, a crude reminder of their depleting provisions. She hadn't eaten adequately in days, and Tom had barely touched his meager rations. The vision of nourishment, of heat, a haven for Tom to recuperate, clashed with her apprehension. Her gaze swept across the manor again, searching for any sign of habitation beyond the beckoning windows. The grounds lay buried in snow, the manicured landscape concealed by the tempest. It appeared uninhabited, or simply fiercely shielded, barring entry from the world outside. "Mommy," Tom's voice was weaker now, a thread of anxiety woven into his question. "I'm so cold." Sarah knelt, her injured ankle flaring, with sharp pain. She brushed a stray snowflake from Tom's cheek, her heart aching with a protective love that felt like a physical wound. She couldn't succumb to her fears. Tom was depending on her. Her mother was depending on her. They had braved so much to arrive here. "All right," she said, her voice stronger, imbued with a newfound strength. "All right, we'll try. But we stay together, understood? And we're very polite. We ask for help, and we thank them for anything they could spare." Tom nodded, his eyes gleaming with a fragile mixture of hope and exhaustion. He wrapped his arms around Sarah's neck, burying his face in her shoulder. "Thank you, Mommy." Sarah embraced him tightly, drawing fortitude from his small body. She glanced at Lucky, who still watched them expectantly, his tail wagging with unwavering enthusiasm. The dog seemed to grasp the weight of her decision, the enormity of the risk they were about to take. Taking a deep breath, Sarah straightened, ignoring the throbbing in her ankle. She grasped Tom's hand, and together they advanced towards the manor. The closer they drew, the more formidable the manor became. The snow-clad ground spread before them, a serene, white expanse that magnified the sheer scale of the edifice. She could now discern finer details, elaborate tracery surrounding the windows, stout wooden doors that appeared impregnable as a fortress gate, and a lengthy, winding driveway that vanished into the swirling snow. As they trudged along the driveway, Sarah noticed something else, a soft, flickering light near the entrance. A lantern, suspended from a wrought iron bracket, cast a friendly, inviting glow on the snow-covered steps. A signal, a silent entreaty to approach. Yet the invitation held a question. Were they welcome? Or were they blundering into something far more perilous than the storm they were fleeing? The thought knotted Sarah's stomach with renewed dread. She couldn't shake the premonition that something wasn't right, that the manor concealed secrets as profound and dark as the tempest raging around them. She halted a few feet from the steps, her heart pounding in her chest. The wind howled around them, lashing her hair across her face and stinging her exposed skin. The manor loomed overhead, its shadowy windows like watchful, dispassionate eyes. "Mommy," Tom whimpered, his voice a mere whisper against the wind's roar. "Are we going inside?" Sarah gazed down at him, his face pale and gaunt in the quivering light of the lantern. She saw his faith, his unwavering trust in her capability to protect him. And at that moment, she knew she couldn't retreat. She had to attempt it. For Tom, for her mother, for herself. Taking another sustaining breath, she squeezed Tom's hand and ascended the steps. Lucky bounded ahead, his paws crunching on the snow-laden stone. Reaching the heavy wooden doors, Sarah paused a final time, her hand hovering above the ornate brass knocker. This was the pivotal moment. No turning back now. She was about to seek entry from a stranger who held their fate within their grasp. She closed her eyes momentarily, uttered a silent supplication, and then, with a trembling hand, she rapped on the door. The sound echoed through the stillness, a small, desperate summons swallowed by the immensity of the storm. Now, all they could do was wait. Mrs. Abigail's kindness. The ancient oak door groaned open, revealing a wash of buttery light against the tempestuous snow. Framed in the glowing rectangle stood a woman, petite and slender, her silvery hair arranged in a precise coil. Behind magnified lenses, her eyes widened in surprise. "Goodness gracious," she murmured, her voice a gentle chime. "What brings you out on such an atrocious night?" Sarah, gripping Tom's small hand, fought down her apprehension and managed a strained smile. We're lost. And my son, he's unwell. We glimpsed your light." She indicated the house with a feeble gesture. "We were desperate." Sensing a benevolent spirit, Lucky gave a hopeful wag of his tail. Compassion etched itself on the woman's features. "Lost? In this maelstrom? Come in, both of you. And your canine companion, of course. You mustn't linger in the cold." She retreated, widening the aperture. "I'm Abigail Harding." Sarah propelled Tom forward, Lucky padding obediently at their heels. The sudden influx of warmth was like a comforting embrace. The foyer was imposing yet inviting, boasting a soaring ceiling and a vibrant fire crackling in a colossal hearth. The air hummed with the aroma of burning wood and a subtle sweetness, akin to spiced apples. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, relief flooding her voice. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Harding. I'm Sarah, and this is my son, Tom." She gently nudged Tom forward. He offered a quiet hello, his young eyes fixed on the elaborate decor. "Please call me Abigail," she responded, her gaze lingering on Tom's pallid complexion. "And this magnificent fellow?" She indicated Lucky, who was now vigorously shaking off snow, scattering droplets onto the gleaming floor. "That's Lucky. He truly led us," Sarah explained. "He guided us here." Abigail chuckled, a melodious, spell-like sound. "A most appropriate name, then. He certainly appears a lucky charm. Now, let's get you both thawed out. Tom looks on the verge of becoming a human popsicle." She guided them down a lengthy corridor, the floorboards whispering beneath their weight. Portraits adorned the walls, their painted gazes seeming to follow their progress. Tom tightened his grip on Sarah's hand, his initial wonder yielding to a flicker of disquiet. "Don't fret, dear," Abigail reassured, noticing his unease. "They're merely my forebears. A rather severe lot, but quite harmless." They entered a snug parlor, outfitted with deep armchairs and a capacious, inviting sofa. Another blaze danced cheerfully in the fireplace, casting fluid patterns on the walls. Abigail gestured towards the sofa. "Seat, seat. I'll procure some blankets and cocoa. You must be absolutely chilled." Sarah gratefully collapsed onto the sofa, drawing Tom close. The warmth began to permeate their frozen limbs, banishing the frigid touch of the storm. Lucky nestled at their feet, emitting a soft sigh of contentment. Abigail flitted about, displaying surprising agility for her years. She returned presently with a pile of thick wool blankets and a tray bearing steaming mugs of hot chocolate, miniature marshmallows floating on the surface. "Here you are," she said, offering Sarah and Tom each a mug. "Drink up. It'll warm you right through." Tom took a cautious sip, his eyes widening with pleasure. "Wow," he mumbled, his voice muffled by the rim of the mug. "This is the greatest cocoa ever." Sarah smiled, heartened to see some rosiness returning to his cheeks. She sampled her own, the rich, chocolatey liquid soothing her scratchy throat. "It's delicious, Abigail. Thank you." "Nonsense," she brushed off, waving a hand dismissively. "It's the very least I can do. I haven't had company in, well, it feels an eternity. This old house becomes rather lonesome, you know." She settled into an armchair across from them, regarding them with kind eyes. Sarah scanned the room, absorbing the cozy furnishings and the gentle shimmer of the firelight. It was remarkable to think this sanctuary of warmth and solace existed just beyond the furious gales and swirling snow. "This is a lovely house," she commented, genuinely impressed. "It must be wonderful to live here." Abigail sighed softly. "It has its moments. It's been in my family for generations, you see, but it's a bit much for one old woman these days." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the portraits. "My husband, he passed on several years ago. And my children, they've all flown the nest, carving their own paths, of course. But it can be quiet here." Sarah felt a jolt of empathy for the woman. She understood the aching of isolation, the longing for connection. "I can imagine," she said gently. "It must be difficult." Abigail offered a small smile. "Well, I keep occupied. I have my garden, my books, and now I have company, which is a delightful surprise." She chuckled again, the sound brighter this time. "Tell me, Sarah, what brings you to this remote corner of the world? You don't seem like locals." Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to divulge. "We were traveling," she answered, carefully selecting her words. "We were heading to my mother's, but the blizzard caught us unawares. We lost our way on the secondary roads." Abigail nodded understandingly. "Those lanes can be treacherous, particularly in this kind of weather." You're fortunate that clever dog of yours discovered my home. He's a smart one. She reached down and stroked Lucky's head. He responded with a soft thump of his tail against the polished wood. Tom, now thoroughly warmed and relaxed, snuggled against Sarah, his eyelids heavy. The fire popped and hissed, painting shifting shadows on the walls. The house exuded safety, security, a refuge from the tempest raging without. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, yielding to the warmth and ease. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of hope. You're more than welcome to stay, Abigail offered, breaking Sarah's reverie. For as long as you need. I have ample room, and it would be my pleasure to host you. Especially Tom. He reminds me so much of my grandson. Sarah's eyes flew open. Are you sure? We wouldn't want to inconvenience you. Nonsense, Abigail said firmly. It's no trouble at all. Indeed, she added, a playful glint in her eye. It's a most welcome diversion. Tom, drifting between wakefulness and sleep, mumbled, Can we stay, Mom? Please. Sarah gazed at her son, his face finally relaxed and clear of pain. She looked at Abigail, her eyes radiating sincere warmth and kindness. She looked at Lucky, who had guided them to this improbable haven. Yes, she replied, her voice choked with feeling. Yes, we'd love to stay. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you so very much. A radiant smile illuminated Abigail's face, lighting up her eyes. Splendid, she declared. Now, let's get this young man tucked into a comfortable bed. He looks utterly drained. And then, perhaps, we can have a proper conversation. A safe haven. Tom, nestled in a warm bed and already mending, erupted in delighted giggles as Lucky's tongue swiped across his cheek. He likes me, Mom. He really likes me. A genuine smile, absent for far too long, bloomed on Sarah's face, crinkling the corners of her eyes. I think the feeling's mutual, sweetie. She stroked Lucky's thick fur, the dog responding by pressing closer to her touch. He's a good boy, isn't he? From the doorway, Mrs. Abigail chuckled softly. Indeed, though his impromptu solo adventure in this weather was rather alarming. Lucky, you caused quite the stir. She clapped, and with an exuberant bark, the dog bounded to her side, tail whipping back and forth. He's my shadow, you see. His disappearing act this morning sent me into a panic. Relief flooded Sarah, swiftly followed by profound thankfulness. He was our guide. We were hopelessly lost, and Tom was fading fast. Without Lucky, her voice caught, choked with emotion. Abigail's kind, sky-blue eyes softened with compassion. That one has a heart of gold. Seems he sensed her need. She beckoned Sarah towards the inviting glow of the hearth. Come, sit. Tell me what transpired. You look utterly spent. Sarah gratefully sank into the plush embrace of an armchair, the rising warmth a soothing balm. Only now did she realize how close to her breaking point she had been. It's a tangled web. Time is a luxury I possess, Abigail reassured her, settling into a rocking chair opposite. And I have a particularly fragrant chamomile steeping. Care for cup. The tea, a fragrant elixir, subtly perfumed the air. As she sipped, Sarah began to unravel the events of recent weeks, starting with the devastating blow of her job termination. She recounted the relentless tide of bills, the frenzied job hunt, the draining reservoir of savings. A tremor entered her voice as she detailed their ill-fated journey to her mother's, the blizzard's cruel trap, and the agonizing hours adrift in the storm. She didn't linger on the terror, but Abigail seemed to absorb it nonetheless, her expression deepening with empathy. We found a cave, but the gale, it was relentless. And Tom, his condition spiraled. Sarah paused, struggling for composure. I was at a loss. I feared. I truly believed we were doomed. Abigail reached across the space and gently clasped her hand. You're safe now, both of you. Lucky delivered you here, and I won't allow any harm to befall you. The unwavering sincerity in her tone was deeply restorative. Sarah found herself confiding more than she intended, unburdening herself of her anxieties and the suffocating weight of single motherhood without support. She spoke of long-cherished dreams, aspirations that now seemed impossibly remote, of writing, of crafting a better future for her child. When she finished, a comfortable hush descended, punctuated only by the fire's delicate crackle and the measured tick-tock of a grandfather clock echoing from the hall. Abigail resisted the urge to offer hollow consolation. She simply listened, absorbing the full weight of Sarah's narrative with quiet understanding. At last she spoke, her voice a low, calming current. Life can be unforgiving, Sarah. It hurls obstacles when we least expect them. Yet, it also possesses a knack for bestowing unforeseen kindness. It strikes me that you and your son were destined to arrive here. Sarah's head snapped up, surprised. Destined? Abigail offered an enigmatic smile. Perhaps. Or perhaps it was simply serendipity at play. Irrespective, you are here now, and you are welcome to remain for as long as needed. This house offers abundant space, and if I'm being honest, it grows rather lonesome rattling around in it alone. Sarah's heart swelled with burgeoning gratitude. I hardly know what to say. I couldn't possibly intrude. Nonsense, Abigail interjected firmly. Consider it a temporary respite, a chance for you to recuperate, and for Tom to regain his strength. You can assist me with a few tasks around the house, perhaps cultivate the garden when the weather permits. It would be a welcome diversion for me, and I suspect a change of scenery would do you both good. The garden? Tom chimed in from the doorway, having clearly eavesdropped. His cheeks were rosy with returning health, his eyes shining with renewed vitality. Do you have a sprawling garden, Mrs. Abigail? Could I lend a hand? Abigail's face brightened. Indeed, I do, young man, and I would be overjoyed to have a co-gardener. Perhaps you could enlighten me about your favorite blooms. Tom launched into a vibrant description of the fantastical garden he had conjured in his imagination, complete with articulate sunflowers and iridescent roses. Abigail listened with rapt attention, her eyes dancing with amusement. Watching them, Sarah felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. Relief, gratitude, and a spark of something long dormant. Hope. A fragile, hesitant hope, but present nonetheless. Perhaps, just perhaps, they had stumbled upon a refuge. A space where they could mend, regroup, and chart a new course. Later that evening, after Tom had succumbed to slumber, Sarah found herself wandering the library, dwarfed by towering shelves packed with time-worn, leather-bound volumes. Abigail had urged her to explore, remarking, "A book is the finest companion one can ask for." She traced her fingers along the spines, a sense of wonder and possibility blossoming within her. It had been an eternity since she had indulged in the simple joy of reading. She selected a cherished copy of Wuthering Heights, a novel she had always adored but seldom had the opportunity to revisit. As she nestled into a comfortable armchair, the hearth radiating a comforting glow, Sarah felt a sense of tranquility begin to settle. A delicate calm, she knew, and the anxieties of the future continued to lurk. But for this moment, she allowed herself to simply be present, to savor the warmth, the silence, and the reassuring weight of the book in her grasp. Before succumbing to sleep that night, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. She would embrace this unexpected chance. She would assist Abigail in any way she could. She would tend to Tom's recovery, and she would seek a way to reciprocate the kindness they had received. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would even manage to rediscover a part of herself along the way. She could only hope that this haven, this unforeseen blessing, wouldn't prove to be just another cruel twist of fate waiting in the wings. The mansion's quiet, while comforting, carried a weight, an air of hidden stories and untold secrets. Sarah shivered, drawing the thick wool blanket around her tighter. She couldn't shake a prickling unease, a sense that their sanctuary might not be as impenetrable as it appeared. But tonight, she would choose to nurture the flickering ember of hope, and pray that it would be sufficient to guide them through whatever trials lay ahead. Days of healing. The days that followed soothed Sarah's spirit. Mrs. Abigail's generosity flowed like a comforting balm, easing the lingering trauma of the blizzard and the persistent anxiety that had shadowed Sarah for so long. The dog, now Tom's shadow, would greet him with exuberant barks and a tail-wagging frenzy capable of upsetting anything nearby. Sarah found herself eager to assist Mrs. Abigail around the estate. "It transcends mere helpfulness," Mrs. Abigail countered, her eyes bright with warmth. "There's a fortitude within you, a quiet strength that resonates deeply. It stirs memories of myself, decades past." At a loss for words, Sarah simply smiled. She was rediscovering herself, or rather, a version long dormant. The stifling weight of responsibility, the relentless worry over finances and Tom's well-being, seemed to lighten incrementally with each passing day. Tom, meanwhile, flourished. The expansive gardens became his personal kingdom. He and Lucky explored every hidden corner, chasing butterflies on the breeze, unearthing imaginary riches, and constructing elaborate forts from fallen limbs. Often, Sarah would discover them sprawled across the lawn, Lucky panting contentedly as Tom spun tales of valiant knights and fantastical beasts. One particularly radiant afternoon, Sarah joined them in the verdant expanse. She carried a novel, hoping to escape into its narrative, but the allure of the sunshine and Tom's contagious delight proved irresistible. Setting the book aside, she watched as Tom, brandishing a twig, did battle with a phantom dragon. Lucky, ever loyal, punctuated the drama with encouraging barks and playful nips at Tom's heels. "Mom, you must be the princess," Tom declared, waving his makeshift sword. Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. "I'm hardly princess material, sweetie." "Yes, you are," Tom insisted. "You're the most wonderful princess ever." And so, Sarah found herself swept into the game, improvising a comical damsel-in-distress performance that sent both Tom and Lucky into fits of giggles. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, genuine joy bloomed within her, a lightness she'd sorely missed. Evenings, after supper, often involved Mrs. Abigail sharing captivating tales of her life. She recounted her worldly travels, thrilling escapades in exotic locations, and the diverse people she'd encountered. Though age had seasoned her voice, it vibrated with an energy that held Tom spellbound. He would sit at her feet, eyes wide with wonder, hanging on every syllable. One evening, as flames danced within the hearth, Mrs. Abigail reminisced about her late husband, a renowned archaeologist. She spoke of their shared zeal for uncovering the mysteries of the past, their expeditions to crumbling ruins, and the abiding love that had united them. "He always maintained that life is one grand adventure," Mrs. Abigail recounted, her voice softening with the memory. And he was right. Even when confronted with hardship, there is always something new to discover, something to treasure. Sarah found herself profoundly touched by Mrs. Abigail's sentiment. This woman, despite her years in solitary existence, had clearly lived a rich and fulfilling life, and now selflessly opened her heart and home to them. As the days went by, Sarah's initial apprehension regarding their unexpected fortune began to wane. She dared to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they had stumbled upon a safe haven, a place where they could piece together a new beginning. The manor, once a symbol of her underlying fears, was gradually transforming into a beacon of hope. One evening, while tucking Tom in a bed, he gazed up at her with guileless innocence. "Mom," he asked, "do you think we could stay here forever?" Sarah hesitated, wary of making promises she might not be able to fulfill. But seeing the hopeful expression on Tom's face, she couldn't suppress a smile. "We'll stay as long as Mrs. Abigail welcomes us," she replied, stroking his hair. "And right now, it certainly appears she enjoys our company." Tom snuggled deeper into his pillow, a contented sigh escaping his lips. "I love Mrs. Abigail," he mumbled, his eyelids growing heavy. "And I love Lucky." Sarah kissed his forehead. "I love them too," she whispered. As she returned to her room, a profound sense of gratitude washed over her. They had found refuge in the most unlikely of places, embraced by the most unexpected of individuals. Mrs. Abigail, with her generous nature and inexhaustible reservoir of stories, had become a surrogate grandmother to Tom, a true friend to Sarah. And Lucky, the stray who had guided them to safety, had become a cherished addition to their makeshift family. Yet, a faint shadow of unease persisted. Lurking beneath layers of thankfulness and optimism, it remained stubbornly present. She couldn't dispel the sensation that their good luck was almost implausible, that something, inevitably, would disrupt their newfound peace. Dismissing the thought as mere paranoia, she resolved to focus on the present, on the healing that was unfolding, on the fragile hope that was beginning to blossom in her spirit. Retrieving her journal and pen, familiar comforts, she settled in to write. Days had passed since her last entry, the trauma of the blizzard stifling her creative impulses. Tonight, however, she felt driven to record her experiences, to capture the essence of these restorative days. She began to write, the pen gliding effortlessly across the page. She described Mrs. Abigail's compassion, Tom's infectious laughter, and Lucky's unwavering devotion. She depicted the beauty of the manor, the comforting warmth of the fire, the delicate fragrance of roses within the conservatory. And she wrote of the hope that had begun to take root within her, a fragile seed of possibility sprouting amidst a world ravaged by storms. As she wrote, it dawned on her that even if their stay at the manor proved temporary, the lessons she was absorbing, the bond she was forging, would endure. She was relearning how to trust, how to believe in the inherent goodness of others, how to find joy in simple pleasures. And she was comprehending that family extended beyond bloodlines. It was about love, loyalty, and the willingness to open your heart to those in need. The wind howled outside, a stark reminder of the relentless storm that raged beyond the manor's protective walls. But inside, Sarah felt a sense of serenity, a sense of belonging that had been absent for far too long. She closed her journal, a gentle smile gracing her lips. The journey toward healing was far from complete, but she was prepared to face whatever lay ahead, so long as her family stood by her side. And now, that family included a gracious woman and a remarkably fortunate dog. A new beginning. The snowfall ceased at last. Sunlight, splintered into 1,000 shimmering shards, flooded the manor, transforming the dust motes into a swirling galaxy. Sarah, from the window, smiled as Tom, swallowed in one of Abigail's oversized coats, romped with Lucky across the lawn. Their buoyant cries, a welcome chorus, briefly quieted the lingering sorrow in her heart. "He's mending," Abigail murmured, joining her at the window. "They both are, and so will you, darling." Sarah offered a wan smile, her gratitude profound. "Words feel inadequate, Abigail, for all you've done." "Nonsense. You've breathed life back into this venerable house. Besides," Abigail added with a playful glint in her eye, "I have an idea to share." She guided Sarah to a comfortable armchair by the fire, its flames dancing merrily. "Mr. Henderson, the librarian, seeks an assistant. It's a modest but pivotal role within the community. Your passion for literature and people makes you ideal." Sarah's spirits lifted. A purpose, a chance to contribute, to earn her keep. "But I lack formal training." "Fiddlesticks," Abigail countered, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Henderson treasures enthusiasm and devotion above all else. He's a gentleman. I'll ring him this morning and inquire about an interview." The library, a brick gem tucked away on a tranquil street, beckoned with the aroma of antique paper and polished wood. Mr. Henderson, his gentle features framed by spectacles and an endearingly disheveled cardigan, greeted them with genuine warmth. Sunlight poured through expansive windows, illuminating ranks of books. "Abigail speaks so highly of you, Sarah," he said kindly. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." He gestured towards a table piled with volumes and notes. "Tell me, what draws you to reading?" Despite her nervousness, Sarah found herself at ease. "It's solace," she confessed, "a doorway to knowledge, to empathy." Also, she added, a shy smile gracing her lips, "it's pure magic. Each book is an invitation to another realm." Mr. Henderson's face lit up. "Exquisitely put. This town needs someone who understands the potency of stories, someone to connect readers with the ideal book, someone who cares deeply. He paused, adjusting his glasses on his nose. The position entails assisting patrons, maintaining order among the shelves, and contributing to community programs. It's unglamorous, but essential. I'm ready to offer you the job, starting next week. What do you say? Sarah's breath hitched. Joyful tears welled in her eyes. It sounds perfect, truly perfect. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Splendid, splendid. He rubbed his hands together with delight. Now let's discuss the schedule. News of Sarah's employment and Abigail's remarkable generosity rippled through the small town. Mayor Thompson, a man of careful deliberation and meticulous bookkeeping, found himself fielding inquiries and opinions from all quarters. He had initially perceived Abigail as an oddball and Sarah's arrival as a potential drain on town resources. Yet, the swell of goodwill toward them both, coupled with the clear benefit of a new librarian, prompted a shift in his thinking. He resolved to visit Abigail. Abigail welcomed him with a gracious smile at the door, ushering him into her sunlit parlor. Mayor Thompson, a pleasure to see you. Please come in and sit down. Thompson, a stout man with a habitually worried countenance, perched gingerly on a velvet armchair. Mrs. Abigail, I must admit, I harbored reservations when I learned of Ms. Miller and her son seeking sanctuary here. Reservations? Abigail inquired, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow. Whatever for? Well, he stammered, the town's coffers are already strained. And, frankly, Ms. Miller's circumstances struck me as potentially problematic. Abigail's smile dimmed slightly. Problematic, perhaps, but not cause for unease. Sarah Miller is a resilient, capable woman, and her son is an intelligent, charming boy. They deserve our support, not our suspicion. Thompson cleared his throat. Of course. I merely wish to ensure that all was in order. The town bears a responsibility to its inhabitants, which includes proper vetting of newcomers. Vetting? Abigail repeated, her tone growing sharp. I assure you, Mayor Thompson, Sarah Miller has been thoroughly vetted by life's trials. She has faced adversity and emerged with her spirit unbroken. That is a testament to her character. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I understand, Mrs. Abigail, and I must concede, the town is impressed by your benevolence. Employing Ms. Miller at the library was inspired. Mr. Henderson can't sing her praises enough. She is a natural fit, Abigail responded, her tone softening once more. She holds a deep affection for books and people. She is precisely what the library, in this town, required. Thompson leaned back, a faint smile gracing his lips. Perhaps you are right, Mrs. Abigail. Perhaps you are right. He paused, then added, I would like to formally welcome Ms. Miller to our community, and to thank you, Mrs. Abigail, for your contribution. As Thompson departed, Abigail chuckled softly. Bureaucracy, she mused aloud, forever struggling to catch up with simple human decency. Meanwhile, Sarah was already absorbed in her new calling. She spent hours immersed in the library's treasures, her fingertips gliding across the book spines, her mind buzzing with concepts for reading groups and community gatherings. Tom, with Lucky loyally at his heels, explored the children's area, his eyes wide with fascination. One afternoon, as Sarah assisted a young girl in locating a book about dinosaurs, she noticed Tom sitting quietly in a nook, sketching in a notebook. She knelt beside him, admiring his artwork. He had drawn the manor, bathed in golden light, with Abigail on the porch, waving. Beside Abigail stood Sarah and Tom, along with Lucky, his tail a blur of happy motion. It's wonderful, Tom, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Truly it is. Tom looked up, his eyes shining. It's our fresh start, Mom, he stated simply. Sarah embraced him tightly, burying her face in his hair. A fresh start. The words reverberated in her heart, a delicate promise in a world that had once seemed determined to break them. She longed to believe it wholeheartedly. She yearned to believe they had finally found sanctuary, a place where they could heal and rebuild. Yet, a faint, persistent voice at the back of her mind sounded a note of caution, a reminder that even the most luminous illusions could shatter without warning. Stronger together. The morning of their departure broke with an invigorating chill, the suffocating grip of the blizzard finally relinquished. Golden light spilled through the mansion's generous windows, burnishing the antique furnishings. Sarah watched Tom, his face radiant, give Lucky one last romp across the sprawling lawn. The dog, tail a blur of motion, seemed to sense the gravity of the leave-taking, playfully snapping at Tom's heels as if etching their shared joy into his memory. Indoors, Abigail observed Sarah, a tender smile gracing her lips. "You possess a fortitude you haven't yet fully recognized, my dear," she stated, her tone imbued with hard-won wisdom. "Life hurls unexpected trials, sudden tempests, but our response dictates our narrative." Sarah offered a weak smile in return. "Words cannot express my gratitude, Abigail. You were our salvation." "Nonsense," Abigail chuckled, a comforting pat on Sarah's hand. "You rescued yourselves. I merely offered a haven." And perhaps Lucky offered a gentle nudge. Her gaze drifted to the window, where boy and dog engaged in their playful dance, a vibrant splash against the wintry backdrop. He has a knack for discovering those in need. The prospect of leaving Abigail's safe haven, of venturing back into the uncertainty beyond, sent a tremor of apprehension through Sarah. But they couldn't continue to rely on Abigail's generosity. They needed to forge their own path, no matter how daunting. Sensing the shift in mood, Tom burst inside, Lucky trailing close behind. "Are we leaving now, Mom?" he asked, his voice a blend of excitement and lament. "Yes, love," Sarah responded, kneeling to embrace him. "Time for our next chapter." The farewell was a bittersweet symphony. Tom lavished Lucky with a final, heartfelt hug, burying his face in the dog's comforting fur. Sarah enveloped Abigail in an embrace, tears threatening to spill over. "We'll visit," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "We'll be back to see you both." Abigail squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I'll be here," she responded, eyes twinkling with warmth. "And recall my words about the library. Thompson may present a gruff exterior, but he possesses a kind heart." As they pulled away in Abigail's reliable Jeep, a gift that sparked both relief and a touch of guilt, Sarah watched the mansion recede in the rearview mirror, a radiant symbol of kindness dissolving into the distance. Lucky remained on the porch, a small, furry guardian against the vast, snowy expanse. Tom waved until the image vanished, then faced Sarah, his expression determined. "We're going to be okay, Mom," he declared, his voice surprisingly resolute. "We have each other." The apartment Abigail secured for them perched above a bakery in the town's core. The delightful aroma of baking bread and warm spices filled the air, a welcoming embrace. It was no mansion, certainly, but pristine and cheerful, boasting 2 compact bedrooms, a snug living area, and a kitchenette that Sarah immediately envisioned filling with the aroma of home cooking. That first evening, after unpacking their sparse belongings, Sarah prepared a simple meal of grilled cheese and tomato soup for Tom. Sharing the meal at the petite kitchen table, a spark of hope ignited within her. It wasn't much, but it was a foundation. They had shelter, nourishment, and each other. And that, she understood, was abundance. The following morning, Sarah, adorned in her best, albeit time-worn, dress, made her way to the library. The building was an imposing brick edifice, its stately facade hinting at the treasure trove of knowledge within. She inhaled deeply and pushed open the weighty oak doors. The interior was serene and softly lit, the atmosphere infused with the fragrance of aged paper and leather. Rows upon rows of bookshelves stretched into the depths, silent guardians of countless stories. Behind the circulation desk, a woman with kind eyes and a welcoming smile greeted her. "You must be Sarah," she offered. "I'm Mrs. Davies, the head librarian. Abigail alerted us to your arrival. We're delighted to have you." Mrs. Davies led Sarah on a tour, introducing her to the staff and outlining her responsibilities. Sarah would assist with shelving, aiding patrons in their searches, and organizing children's story time. The work wasn't glamorous, but was employment nonetheless, and a chance to immerse herself in the world she cherished most: books. Her initial days passed in a whirlwind of Dewey Decimal classifications and forgotten titles. She rediscovered the pleasure of connecting individuals with narratives, of witnessing their faces illuminate upon discovering the perfect read. She even initiated a small writing circle for aspiring local authors, a means of sharing her ardor and encouraging others to pursue their literary aspirations. Mayor Thompson, as Abigail predicted, remained reserved but polite. He would occasionally visit the library, ostensibly to oversee its upkeep, but Sarah suspected he was also assessing her. His words were never overtly critical, but his presence served as a constant reminder that she was still an outsider, still needing to prove her worth. One afternoon, while assisting a young girl in locating a dinosaur-themed book, Thompson approached the circulation desk. He cleared his throat, and Mrs. Davies excused herself to answer a ringing phone. "Mrs. Miller," Thompson began, his tone gruff, yet not unkind, "I wish to commend you on your contributions to the library. The children appear to relish your story time." Sarah looked up, surprised. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor," she replied. "I find it equally enjoyable." He shifted uneasily. "Abigail holds you in high regard," he continued, avoiding her gaze. "She possesses a discerning eye for character." Sarah smiled. "Indeed," she concurred. "She has shown exceptional kindness to my family." Thompson nodded slowly. "This town, it doesn't always offer easy assimilation. We are a tight-knit community, and we tend to be wary of newcomers." "I understand," Sarah responded. "My sole desire is to create a fulfilling life for my son and myself." "I believe you shall," Thompson stated, a hint of warmth infusing his voice. "Continue on your present path." He paused, then added, almost as an afterthought, "and advise that son of yours to keep Lucky away from Mrs. Henderson's prize petunias." Sarah laughed. "I will," she promised. "And thank you, Mr. Mayor." As Thompson departed, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. Perhaps, just perhaps, they were finally finding their place. Maybe this small town, with its cautious populace and its comforting bakery scents, could become their forever home. That evening, while tucking Tom into bed, she recounted her conversation with the mayor. "He likes you, Mom," Tom murmured, his eyes already drooping. "He's just trying not to show it." Sarah smiled. "Perhaps you're right," she responded. "And perhaps we're finally starting to settle in." Tom yawned deeply. "I like it here, Mom," he mumbled. "It smells like cookies." Sarah kissed his forehead. "Me too, sweetheart," she whispered. "Me too." Later, seated at the small kitchen table, grading papers from the writing group, she reflected on the whirlwind of recent weeks. The blizzard, the cave, Lucky, Abigail, the library, it all felt dreamlike, a peculiar and surreal odyssey that had led them to this cozy apartment above a bakery. She reached for her journal and pen, ready to pour out her musings onto the page. She wrote of the lingering fear, the uncertainty that still clouded her thoughts. But she also chronicled the burgeoning hope, the resilience she had discovered in both herself and her son. She wrote of Abigail's benevolence, Lucky's unwavering loyalty, and the unexpected connection she had formed in this nascent town. And she wrote of the future, a future still nebulous, but brimming with potential. As she wrote, she realized that they weren't merely surviving, they were rebuilding. They were stronger now, more resilient, more determined than ever to sculpt a life overflowing with love, laughter, and a sense of belonging. They were a family, bound by blood and shared hardship, and they would confront whatever challenges lay ahead, together. The pen glided effortlessly across the page, the words flowing freely as she became immersed in the unfolding narrative of their lives, a story that was still being written, a story that was just beginning.